The legend of the SEAL training really comes out of the nature of BUD/S and Hell Week. They're all qualified. Everyone's fit enough. Everyone's theoretically smart enough. And yet 90% don't make it, mainly because they didn't prepare properly. The biggest thing that they were missing is durability and mental toughness.
Navy SEAL Commander Mark Devine.
One of the reasons why so many people quit or get injured is because they're in this state of hyperarousal and they start making worse and worse decisions. I think it was the meditation that probably brought me the most benefit, especially when it came to the team. Breathing through your nose has the powerful effect of calming down your nervous system because you're slowing down the inhale, you're massaging your vagus nerve, you're activating that parasympathetic rest and digest. So while you're getting all this stuff thrown at you, or whether it's the world or in the SEAL training, the instructors or the situation, by deep diaphragmatic, slow nostril breathing, you can stay in physiological control. It's critically important to maintain a positive mindset. A positive mindset is so key. We know that from athletics, and I learned that because I grew up in a very negative family environment. It was very painful, and I felt awful. And so I learned that I had to condition my mind to be positive by talking positively to myself. Even if I didn't feel it, I would stake it until I make it. So you can't control anything outside of yourself, but you can control how you respond to it, how you're going to make meaning of it. When you wake up in the morning, knowing that this could be your last day, how's it going to affect you?
Hey there, welcome to the Happy Habit Podcast. If you're new around here, my name is Matthew. You'll find me here Mondays and Thursdays talking to experts on the subjects of health, well-being and self-improvement. If you're already familiar with the podcast and approve of some of the work that I've done over the last 400 episodes, over the last 4 years, well, you can show your support for free. Like, subscribe, share with other people who you think might enjoy these episodes and subjects covered too. And you can leave the podcast a positive rating on iTunes or on Spotify. And if you're over on YouTube, become a subscriber over there. Many of you have done to date. You can also leave a comment and click that bell notification for any future videos. Now, to be a soldier requires a particular kind of mindset, discipline and mental toughness. And to be a member of the Special Forces requires a serious mastery of the mind. In an effort to tap into this mindset, I speak with Navy SEAL Commander Mark Devine, who by his own admission was the archetypal overachiever physically, but it wasn't until he discovered karate and Zen meditation that he really tapped into what he was capable of physically and mentally. We hear about his chaotic family background growing up and how it undermined his confidence, which was in contrast with his physical prowess and success in sport up to that point. Commander Devine talks about how transformative meditation was in how he saw himself and life's challenges, and how it gave him the vital strengths to change career, enter the military and lead a team of 6 Navy recruits through the tortuous 9 months of brutal Navy SEAL training, which included the infamous Hell Week. Devine was only one of 19 recruits out of a total of 185 who passed Navy SEAL training that year and would go on to spend 20 years in the Navy SEALs. We also explore the 4 key skills that are crucial to Commander Devine's philosophy, including visualization and positive self-talk. Now, while the terms Navy SEALs, Special Forces and the SAS will conjure up various preconceived notions of that world, I want you to park them for the moment, because this conversation focuses on mastering your mind, overcoming that inner negative dialogue, which, let's be honest, we all engage in to our detriment. Now, let's be frank, if someone who faced the brutal training and life-threatening situations which Commander Devine had to, then I know we can absolutely glean some really great advice to help us deal with our own everyday lives. This is a great conversation. I hope you enjoy. Well, Commander Mark Devine, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. We will come to your substantial career as a Navy SEAL commander shortly, but to give people a sense of where you came from and how you came to master your mind, I want to go back to that transition from a very small rural town of 375 people to Manhattan, to a place where you met a guy, a very influential man called Nakamura. Can you take me on that journey?
Sure. Yeah, I was a small town in upstate New York. It's probably not too different than a rural town in Ireland. Dairy country, you know. Actually, they called it the Central Leather Stocking region. I think they must have made leather, I guess. Anyways, there wasn't a whole lot going on up there. My family was, I guess, prototypical chaotic, American family. Lots going on. Let's just say under that roof, a lot of chaos, a lot of alcohol consumption on my father's side, and so, young Mark found his outlet by spending a lot of time outside. It was beautiful upstate New York. Growing up in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, we don't have the forces that we have with social media and nonstop connection. So I really honed my mind first by spending a lot of time outside and doing a lot of kind of adventurous athletic things. I used to hike for long hours up in the Adirondack Mountains, and found myself very comfortable in the water, swimming, water skiing, barefoot water skiing, long swims on the lakes and the Adirondacks. And that kind of parlayed into an athletic career. So I became an endurance athlete, competitive swimmer in high school, and which led me to being recruited to swim collegiately at a small upstate New York school called Colgate University. Colgate's a pretty good school, so I found myself, coming from this public high school, never heard of a curve, everything was easy, barely had to study, to now I'm competing with, folks from downstate, who went to these like pristine prep schools and whatnot. Because Colgate was considered a lower Ivy League school, very hard to get into, and I considered myself pretty lucky to get into it. But I continued my my athletics there, and kind of eked out a B- average, graduating with like a whopping 2.8 GPA. But this one company, well, let me back up a little bit. There was a big turning point while I was there, and that was my junior year. I was fortunate enough to get selected to go to an overseas study program. So I actually came over to London, to your neck of the woods, across the pond, as you would say. And I got exposed to British culture, Scottish culture. I didn't make it over to Ireland, but really spent a lot of the time kind of cruising around, and also over in Europe. And so for a little farm town kid to go from tiny little upstate New York and to have that exposure really kind of exploded my brain. And also everyone I went with was securing these high prestigious jobs, and they had already had internships lined up for that senior year, and I didn't have anything lined up. My family business was, kind of like the go-to for me for the summers. And I started to watch how these other kids thought and acted. And I said, that's interesting. I wonder if I could do that. And so I applied for a summer job in New York City for my that time between my junior and senior year. And I got it with Coldwell Banker, a big commercial real estate firm. So I found myself down in New York City between my junior and senior year. And then it was the second thing that kind of blew my mind. It's like, here I am, from 375 people in Barneville, New York to Manhattan. And so that gave me the confidence to apply for like a real, air quote, real job when I was graduating from Colgate. And I got picked up by Coopers and Lybrand, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers. And they knew I was a little bit of a risk because the program also entailed us going to NYU Stern School of Business to get a master's in accounting, which most of us parlayed into an MBA. And they put me on academic probation because of my GPA. So 5 weeks after graduating from Colgate, I found myself in Manhattan working for Coopers and Lybrand as an auditor, even though I had not a single accounting class. In fact, they didn't offer it at Colgate. And I was going to NYU School of Business, Stern School of Business at night. It was quite the intense transition. And I, to be honest, really lacked the confidence to pull it off. Exteriorly, I had everything squared away. If you looked at me, I was like Mr. Roger Ramjet. I was putting points on the board. I was the overachiever, really kind of masking for a deep sense of, lack of understanding, I guess, lack of self-worth, the things that accrue from growing up in a turbulent, traumatic kind of family. There's a powerful time though, because there was a lot of learning. It's like drinking through a fire hose. That's why I really am a big proponent of people really taking on stretch goals, even no matter how scary they are, because that exposure to something so new, even if you feel incompetent, leads to a radical growth, right? And you will fail, and I did fail several times over on my way to what you could call any measurable success, but the growth that accrued was extraordinary. So,
Well, that will then take us nicely then to the period where you're in Manhattan and then you decide that you have a couple of hours free in the evenings and that you want some kind of mechanism whereby you can occupy yourself, maybe mentally and physically, and then you happen upon this karate club, and then you're introduced to this man, this Zen master who is called Nakamura, which then fosters your interest in that whole area of mind mastery and breathing.
that's right. So everything I've described really was fit within the conditioned construct, of my life, right? I mean, the way I was brought up, the conditioning of my family, our culture, work hard, get rewarded, get a good job, earn the money, that kind of whole story of the American dream, was also the European dream, in the way that the world is constructed, our economic systems and such. And so I didn't question it. Part of my story was also that I was this athlete. And so this is the positive side of it. I didn't see myself as a temporary athlete who happened to have a college experience. I was good enough, actually. Senior year, I started rowing competitively, crew in my junior year. And I was good enough to test for the Olympics senior year. But I wasn't good enough to make it technically, right? Remember at the seat racing camp, I was probably one of the fittest, but my skills hadn't been developed enough. So I didn't make it. And I was thinking to myself, well, you know what, there was a shot, but I still feel like I'm a lifelong athlete. And so I took up competitive triathlons. And so I find myself in New York now, 5 weeks after graduating from college. And I was going to continue my athletic endeavors, even though I'm now also working full-time and going to school full-time. Made perfect sense to me. So I would, like you said, I would run in the morning and I would go to the gym at lunch and get a good workout in, high intensity interval training. And I had a big block of time between work and school at night. And that was by design because the Coopers knew they were participating. They weren't funding, but they needed us to get this master's in accounting so we could pass the CPA exam, et cetera. So they let us off a couple hours early. And most of my peers would, find time to go home and change and study or whatever. And I looked at that as another opportunity to train. And so I wasn't sure exactly what to do because I didn't have enough time to row or go do something complicated. So I was pondering this and I stumbled upon this martial arts studio, and it was Seido Karate. And the grandmaster was the founder of this style of karate, a Japanese guy, just the most extraordinary guy I've ever met to that point in my life. Tadashi Nakamura. He was a 9th degree black belt. It was only because he wouldn't confer a 10th degree upon himself because it was his style of karate, right? He had that humility. But he was also a Zen teacher. And so part of his training was Zen. We would meditate before and after every class. There was a dedicated Zen class every Thursday evening. And there was a very small number of people who would attend that one. I mean, this guy had hundreds of thousands of students worldwide. And in New York, where he was headquartered, he was teaching there several days a week. That school itself probably had 400 or 500 students. It was extraordinary. But only 10 people would go to this Zen class, and they were all black belts. And so I as a white belt, was really intrigued with that, and I asked him about it, and he said I could attend the class. So I started meditating, and I would have such profound experiences, even though it was challenging, right? These long, hour-long sits on that little wooden bench, just staring at the floor and breathing in and out through my nose and trying to not think, right? That was the basic protocol of Zen boot camp, I would call it, concentration boot camp, is concentration training. So that's the path that Zen takes. That's the entry point, is to learn how to deeply concentrate your mind, to narrow the focus of your thought stream to one thing. And in this case, it was just the breath. And then a count. And your ideal was to get to a count of 10 without, honestly, without thinking of any other thoughts. Of course, it's an impossible task if you're truthful, if you're honest. But the process, it's not the goal, it's the process of practicing that day in and day out, which sharpens your mind and begins to give you the capacity to radically focus and to become much less distractible, and to hold your concentration for longer periods of time. So I would say that was kind of the phase 2 of my mental training. Phase 1 was long periods in nature, using kind of athletic monostructural movements like running, rucking, hiking, swimming, that really refine the mind. Because, as you know, when you do those things, there's also some element of breath control. There's also an element of concentration, but you're doing these repetitive tasks. So there's a little bit of like a wax on, wax off kind of feel to that, or overlap to that. If you are the type of individual, either through intention or just kind of happen like with me, where you allow your mind to just kind of settle in to that repetition and not obsessively, think while you're doing those tasks. So that led me, because I had those experiences, that led me to actually find the meditation much easier, and I was more successful than others at it because I had that preparatory work as an athlete. I think a lot of people fail and get really frustrated with meditation because they haven't done the preparatory work. Their body and their brains haven't been, conditioned to be able to sit for long periods of time and just breathe and focus on one thing. And they get distracted really easily, or they get really uncomfortable. Of course, that grasping mind wants to tell them that they're wasting their time and there's something better that they should be doing, and so they quit. I didn't have those issues, and so I stuck with it. And the other thing that was really important for me in sticking with this, because I really trusted this guy Nakamura. He was very different than anyone I'd ever met before. Like, he was an enlightened master, I see now in retrospect, and I didn't know what that meant back then. But he had this air about him, this aura, and his presence, which was extraordinary, right? He was very spontaneous, very light but serious at the same time. Like he actually could hold these dualities really powerfully. Like, he's extremely intense but extremely playful simultaneously, right? He would be had this presence, like he's this boulder, like immovable as a mountain. And at the same time, like, you could see him spinning through the air, flying like a bird. And like, how could an individual kind of hold these polarities and be able to kind of slide back and forth amongst them really easily? And that was a really powerful kind of example for me of what's possible through a long period of training the body, the mind, and the spirit, and integrate them into into this wholeness that I saw in this individual. And so a big part of me wanted that, right? Wanted to kind of like experience that. And it was so different than the way I'd been brought up. So I really took to both the physical training of the martial art as well as the mental training in the Zen. And they really do go hand in glove, right? The yin and the yang, or the yang and the yin, I guess, the hard being the yang and the yin being the meditation. I found after about 6 months into the practice that when I would deeply concentrate, that there were times where without any effort on my mind, on my own, I would just kind of drop off into a space where I was just deeply present and aware, but time really just had no control over me. Like, I wasn't like marking time or feeling like I was time bound. And those experiences sometimes lasted just a few minutes. Sometimes they would last like 20, 30 minutes. And they had a very rich kind of like a ephemeral quality to them. They're hard to describe in words. Everything was so alive and vibrant when I would come out of those moments. I would also come out of those moments or out of those experiences with like some gift, I call it, like some knowingness or some sense of, I just learned something, but I didn't know, it wasn't something I could immediately name. And what I started to come back with knowing that it took me a while to name was that I was not fulfilling my calling, my purpose. This path I had set myself down, which was conditioned into me, and I took it totally for granted that I was meant to be a business guy and get this MBA and CPA and make a lot of money and then probably go back and run the family business, which had been around for over 100 years. And all of that, everyone would say, yeah, green light, go. That's awesome, Mark. Great job, right? You're doing everything right. And I just kept coming back from those meditation sessions with a sense that I was doing everything wrong. It was the wrong thing for me. Like, it wasn't my calling. And so I started to ponder if not that, then what? And I got this message that I was a warrior, that I was meant to be a warrior. So the rest is history. It took me a little bit while longer, or maybe another 9 months to a year, to really refine that sense of warriorness, to really decondition and break down the storyline that I was meant to be a CPA, MBA, business professional, make a lot of money, run the family business. And from there, I had fully accepted my warrior archetype. And then I had learned about the Navy SEALs, and I had this, like, almost you could call it a premonition that was it. That was how I was supposed to express my warrior calling. And so I went down that road and ended up getting into the SEALs and left all that behind. In 1989, November 89, I received my MBA, my CPA, certified public accountancy, and got my first degree black belt, passed my showdown test, all in the same month, November. And I was on the bus at the end of the month to officer candidate school. I left it all behind, become a Navy SEAL.
It's extraordinary, that transition. It's as if you became a different person, or should I say, you probably found the person that was beneath the mask.
That's right.
Really, that's what it sounds like. I suppose what people would be interested in hearing is about the kind of those small details about being a Navy SEAL. You were one of 185 recruits, only 19 passed to the actual training. And then you were a leader of, I think, 7 individuals, and all 7 passed, which was itself quite remarkable. So could you give us a brief account of what that training involved, and then why that leadership, which you were able to bring to your team, why it was so successful in bringing all 7 recruits through that training process?
Sure. SEAL training and the SEALs themselves have become a little legendary, for better or for worse. Most of the SEALs would prefer not that. But there are a few good reasons. And, let me just say at the outset that, we had a saying that there's no one best special ops force. There are special operators who excel maybe above others because of their discipline and their warrior archetype or warrior ethos. So, like when we worked with the SAS and the SBS from the UK, like, these are just extraordinary individuals, and it's an extraordinary service. And the training is, in some ways, probably harder. In other ways, SEALs is harder. But the legend of the SEAL training really comes out of the nature of BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEALs, and Hell Week, which is what most people think of SEAL training. They think of Hell Week. Well, SEAL training is 9 months long. Hell Week is 1 week. But it's very different type of training. And so you can imagine it, the BUDS itself, minus Hell Week, is really developing skills, developing teamwork, the ability to be a team, a good teammate, as well as a leader, because everyone's a leader. Everyone's a leader, everyone's a follower. That's part of the SEAL ethos. And so the instructors are there to look for their next teammates. And so everyone comes in, those 185 individuals, all men at the time, and still all men, because we haven't had any females make it beyond a few days. They're all qualified. I mean, some have trained for years just to be able to make it to that starting line. And so there's, like, everyone's fit enough, everyone's theoretically smart enough, and yet 90% don't make it. It's fascinating, right? So one of the biggest reasons is Hell Week. And even just the run up to Hell Week. Hell Week happens like in week 4. They change it up. For when I went through, it was week 7, but now it's earlier, and they want to get it away done with it earlier. And there's such a buildup psychologically, and the intensity of going from starting day 1 and the amount of enormity of load that's put on you constantly, day in and day out, for those 4 weeks up to Hell Week. Already you lose like 30% of the class. So even with all the training and preparation that people put into, most people underestimate the amount of work that they're going to have to do. And so their bodies simply don't hold up, or their minds don't hold up. This is like why when I started SEAL Fit, I wanted to really prepare the candidates, SEAL candidates and other special ops candidates. Say, you know what, we're going to over-prepare you, because I'm going to prepare you for combat. You have to understand that your body needs to be capable of 20 times more than what you think it's currently capable of now, because when you get into the program, into the SEAL program or SES or whatever, they're going to put 40% more on you, right? And so you got to close the gap quickly and then do the work when you're there. So of the 185, let's say we lost 30% or 40% before Hell Week, and it was mainly because they didn't prepare properly. And the biggest thing that they were missing is durability and mental toughness, right? And durability is the ability of your body to withstand punishment day in and day out, just constant, never-ending punishment. It's very different than athletic training with all your recovery time, and you have a very different training cycle that has long and medium and short type burst work, and some of it's practice and some of it's training. Buds is just 100% full on, right? I mean, not every evolution is full on, but every day you're doing a punishing run, a punishing swim, practically obstacle course. You're working with the logs and boats, and it's just brutal. And then Hell Week comes along, and up until then, you've been blessed with being able to sleep at night, right? You have some long days, but generally, you're having dinner and you're pretty much done. You may have a class after dinner. You may have a night evolution here and there, but you're always going to get at least 4 to 5 hours of sleep until Hell Week. Now, Hell Week kicks off on a Sunday, sometime in the afternoon. The buildup is intense. People's emotions are all over the place because they know what's coming. And you're up for facing 6 days of training around the clock, no sleep. And that is both a physical, mental, emotional, and even a spiritual test. And so another 40 to 50% of the class don't make it through Hell Week. So now you're at like week 5 of training out of 9 months. And, my class went from, 185 down to like 50. And then the rest of the time, we just whittled away down to 19 original people. So for me, there was a few things that I had going for me. One was endurance athletics, and as well as martial arts, any type of fighting art. And I would include water polo in that, because basically water polo is underwater combat. Develops durability, right? Your body just gets, like wrestling, the punishment of wrestling, the punishment of endurance training, where you're just, really beating up your joints and constantly recovering. And you're putting your body under load, and the ability to make, to move with load, right? So that's another thing that's really unique. You're always carrying something. You might be carrying a body for a long period of time, or carrying a boat, or carrying a log on your head with others, or above your head. And so most people don't train that way, right? They don't train carrying load. And so I had it, I did, right? And so I was comfortable moving with load, and that was part of my functional training. And nowadays it's much more common, right? You see rucking as part of people's training plans, which is loaded training. Furthermore, I was accustomed to kind of torturing myself for long periods of time, right? And so again, that was uncommon in my days. You didn't see like ultra runners, and that was a sport that kind of came up later on. But in the 80s, there wasn't really a lot of that. But I was into full-on triathlons and like rucking for 24 hours at a time. And so I was really ready for that long kind of sleep deprivation experience. So anyone who's training for those things should consider adding like those to your retinue. But I think it was the meditation that probably brought me the most benefit, especially when it came to the team, right? So I did have a small boat crew, 6 others, so 7 us total. Through my meditative practice and my work with Nakamura, I learned 4 really practical skills that we still teach today, called the Big 4 skills. One of them is breath control, like deep diaphragmatic nostril breathing, which any good martial art or yoga program will have embedded in it, and now the Navy SEALs as well, leads to the capacity to constantly downregulate from hyperarousal. And of course, the SEALs and the instructors are masterful at putting you in a state of hyperarousal. Well, hyperarousal is great, as you know, to get out of a crisis, but if you're always in hyperarousal, then your hormones get out of whack, got too much cortisol, all these things that we now know about. And so that basically if you stay in that hyperarousal state, you won't sleep well. And it eventually degrades your performance significantly. If you stay in that fight or flight, your IQ will literally drop by like 50%. And you can't take in the information and process it very well. And therefore you make really bad decisions. And that's, again, one of the reasons why so many people quit or get injured is because they're in this state of hyperarousal and they start making worse and worse decisions, which leads to injury or basically doing things that cause them to quit or to be run out. So I taught my team how to box breathe whenever we were kind of in a recovery moment. Could have been even just a 5 minutes, after we did an evolution. I would have them kind of breathe slowly through their nose, inhale to a count of 4, hold your breath to a count of 4, exhale to a count of 4, hold your breath. And then this led to our ability to stay in a deep nostril diaphragmatic breathing pattern when we were under load, when we were doing work. So, and I was always encouraging them, okay, shut your mouth, breathe through your nose, shut your mouth, breathe through your nose. And breathing through your nose has this effect, a powerful effect of calming down your nervous system, because you're slowing down the inhale, you're massaging your vagus nerve, you're activating that parasympathetic rest and digest. So while you're getting all this stuff thrown at you, or whether it's the world or in the SEAL training, the instructors or the situation, by deep diaphragmatic, slow nostril breathing, you can stay in physiological control, stay in that homeostatic balance. And that has this amazing effect because the brain is also staying in balance because it's an organ, and that's perceived subjectively as being more calm and in control. We would literally get these feelings like as a team where everyone else is running around with like a chicken with their head cut off, all the other boat crews, and we're just calmly going through the task, breathing and just being calm. It's almost like we had like this protective bubble around us. And so that alone probably would have gotten us through as a team. But secondarily, I also had learned that it's critically important to maintain a positive mindset. A positive mindset is so key. We know that from athletics. And I learned that because I grew up in a very negative family environment that it was very painful and I felt awful. And so I learned that I had to condition my mind to be positive by talking positively to myself. Even if I didn't feel it, I would stake it until I make it kind of attitude. And I developed this capacity that I would teach to others to have positive mantras and to basically, I called it the worm process, to witness when you're going negative and to be able to intercept that and to redirect your mind to something that, the positive kind of internal dialogue. And we would also support each other with positive external dialogue, which is a great thing to really kind of reinforce that. So that was the second skill. The third was visualization, which I learned initially from my swim coach at Colgate. And then I used it with great effect when I was applying to the SEALs. I would I had a process of visualizing myself becoming a Navy SEAL, and it had an extraordinarily positive effect, right, in terms of creating this future memory, this future potential, that the more you practice a future potential in your mind with imagery, the more it becomes a probable future. And that's what I started to do with my team, is we visualize ourselves succeeding at every event or evolution. And we visualize ourselves graduating together as a team. And we would do that very casually. It wasn't like a big deal. A lot of it happens through the dialogue, and I would, paint the picture in their mind's eye and just talk about it. And then they would share that. And so imagery and positive future expectations are really powerful. And that was the third skill. So now we got controlling the breath, which controls your physiology, learning to have that positive internal dialogue, which keeps your energetic state in that positive territory, which has more power. And you're not going to weaken yourself by talking negatively or having those thoughts of, coulda, shoulda, whatever, or can't. And then always being able to evoke the image of the victory, of the end state that you're looking for or driving for, so that it's always with you. Because when it gets really, when the suffering is being heaped on you and it's cold and wet and miserable in the middle of the night, and you're like on day 4 of Hell Week and you haven't slept, you got to remember why you're there and where you're going. And I know a lot of people who quit in those moments, and you ask them afterwards, and I said, "Why did you quit, Bill?" And he's like, "Well, in that moment, I couldn't remember why I was there. I couldn't remember why I want to be a SEAL. All I wanted to do was get the heck out of there, get comfortable again." So you got to have the image very clear. You got to practice that, and until it becomes, part of who you are. And the last skill is really to break everything down into the smallest possible task. We call them micro goals. And those goals are obviously linked, right? So if your target is, in Hell Week to row around Coronado Island, Well, that's a long way, and it's going to take you hours, and people are going to fall asleep and hallucinate. It's going to be miserable, right? And so if you're thinking, oh my God, I've heard about this evolution, this is going to suck, we're not going to make it, then you're already lost. So you basically just chunk it into little tiny tasks, right? So maybe your first task is to get the boat in the water. Yay, get through the surf zone. Then your next task is to, you set a milestone, right? Oh, we're going to get to that light down there. Of course, it's in the middle of the night. So you set these micro goals, and then you're just driving toward the completion of that small goal. And what happens is you're just chalking up these small wins, which give you a lot of confidence and start to build momentum. And so you can, get 40% and you've already completed, 5 or 10 micro goals and you've won them or succeeded at them. It gives you a tremendous confidence and motivation and momentum. So those 4 skills I deployed myself and I taught them to my small team, and we ended up just dominating. And those skills are really powerful for anybody to maintain composure under pressure, to be radically focused, to be able to keep the big picture in mind while also radically focusing on the most smallest of details, because the devil's in the details. So we teach them to executives and entrepreneurs and organizations, along with some other skills, because they're really powerful for resilient leadership.
And were those 4 skills that you just talked about that you honed during your training as a Navy SEAL, were they transferable then to your subsequent 20 years as an operative in various missions all throughout the world, in dangerous war zones, etc.?
100%. Yeah, these skills are critical skills for managing your internal state, right? Your internal state of affairs. Everything that happens outside of you is going to be influenced by how you think, what you're feeling, your beliefs, biases, and internal patterns. And so these 4 skills essentially create an internal, like a operating system of total awareness and total control. So you can't control anything outside of yourself, but you can control how you respond to it and how you're going to make meaning of it. So that's the shortest course in mental toughness, is control your interior state and develop the capacity to respond from the field of pure potential, as opposed to the linear Newtonian law, field of cause and effect, right? And the way to do that is to activate a flow state where you have control of time. And the way to do that is to train your mind through the breath, through imagery, through the dialogue, and through focusing skills, to move away from your center of attention being seated with your thoughts and your reactions and your beliefs and your biases, to where your center of attention is in the mode of witnessing. So we are always witnessing and watching. And so you become like your own personal OODA loop, right? Observe, orient, decide, and act, because you're not caught up thinking that you are the thinker. You're caught up thinking instead, or observing the thinker. And from that position as the observer or the witness, you've got all the time in the world, right? To be able to discern what's really going on and to not react, because most reaction is going to lead to a suboptimal outcome. To be able to position yourself for much more positive response, and then to act on that response powerfully, again, using the skill of micro goals and radical focus. All of these come naturally from a long practice of meditation and learning, certain skills like I've been describing here. And I honestly think that they're the next frontier for leadership development, and I'm teaching them to leaders and executives and coaches because there's a lot of things that in our world that are going to be handled by AI and that are going to be outsourced and whatnot. And there's a lot of fear about what does it mean for humans. And I said, well, it's a great opportunity for humans, because we can finally have the time to develop those skills that have been atrophying for years or have never been acknowledged. Creativity, the ability to have like spontaneous knowingness, or direct perception, intuition, And these are the skills that I was developing quite unwittingly, right? By sitting on that meditation bench and by teaching those big four skills to my teams in the SEALs. And, frankly, it's everyone is just completely, not everyone, but most people are really unaware of the vast potential that lies inside of them. And when you could develop that potential through mental development, through mental training, then you accrue great clarity, sense of purpose, and a knowingness of what your real reason for being here on this planet is, and a peace of mind, which is really what everyone's kind of looking for, but not knowing where to find it. And so they keep looking for it outside of themselves. And it's like playing whack-a-mole, right? You'll never find it there. And if we could teach this to growing number of people, it would have a ripple effect, because it also leads to an opening of the heart, greater inclusiveness, more compassion, world-centered care and concern, and violence would be greatly reduced in the world. It's interesting, you hear that coming from a warrior, because I'm so, I was comfortable with violence, but I was not inclined toward violence because of the work I've been doing on myself, right? And I'm more in tune with the ancient warrior traditions, like the native traditions, where the warrior was the last one to pick up the weapon, right? And we know that today it's not the warriors who declare war, right? It's the politicians and the bullies, right? It's the warriors that go clean up the messes. Anyways, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think that's what to put a pin in what I'm trying to say is that developing yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually in an integrative fashion, which is what we do at Unbeatable Mind, leads to this opening. And that opening creates this sense of witnessing, meaning you're not caught up in your dramas, and you see the dramas for what they are, like the ego's projections, and you don't get caught up in it, so you become curiously detached. And in that curious detachment, anytime the drama has your character involved, you stay detached and you watch it and you witness it and you observe, orient, and make a really good decision, one that's more inclusive, compassionate, takes in more perspectives, and then you act on it with radical focus and clarity. And that leads to much, much better outcomes, because again, you're operating from the nonlinear domain as opposed to the linear cause and effect domain. Power versus force, right? Using Dr. David Hawkins' terminology. And the more people we can, through training of this nature, elevate into this field of power and operating at a place of compassion and open-mindedness, then that has a ripple effect out in the world. And so you just will see a lessening of the other side of that equation, of the violence and the negativity in the world. So I'm very bullish on the future, because this training is becoming more common. I mean, we're podcasts like this and discussions like this. People are interested and intrigued. How do we develop our minds this way? Well, it's right there for you to find out, but you got to do the work, right? There's no pill, there's no hack, there's no app that I know of that can do it for you. You got to do the work and plumb the depths of your inner domain, so to speak.
Which reminds me of Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, which I think you've read, actually, as far as previous interviews I've listened to are concerned. You've done a huge amount of work on yourself, a huge amount of introspection and self-analysis. It always seemed to have been the case, even from when you were living in that rural town of 375 people. I'm interested to ask you then, how did you navigate leaving the Navy SEALs then, after being with them for 20 years? Was that an easy transition for you to make?
Well, it's interesting. Someone asked me the other day what was one of the hardest decisions. And I think that was it, right? So on the one hand, I actually spent 10 years on active duty and 10 years in reserves. And about the 7-8 year mark, I had gotten married. And, we have a saying in the Navy, if the Navy wanted you to have a wife, they would issue you one. And so I don't think I had any appreciation for how hard it was going to be, both for myself and for her. You're gone all the time. The special ops are unique. And frankly, anybody in the military is gone all the time. And it's a challenge on marriage. It really is. So I had this inflection point. I had an opportunity to point myself toward DevGuru, right? And which is the tier 1 Navy SEAL unit. I was certainly capable. I was a great leader. I had my bumps and ups and downs, but I really had the capacity to make that work. And it would have been extraordinarily fun, right? And my team, my brothers, right? There's a bond that you develop in special ops unit, which is just very rare. It's just incredibly deep. So I always say, long live the brotherhood. But I also had a really deep bond with my wife, right? She wasn't a transaction for me. It wasn't a trophy, right? She was someone I was deeply connected with, and we were like soulmates. And so I knew that if I went down that road that it wouldn't work out. Like I just knew. That's another good point. Like one thing that accrues to you from a deep, long period of meditation and introspection is this principle of wei wu wei, action without the actor, meaning your ego is out of the way, essentially. The action is flowing spontaneously. And so knowledge also can flow spontaneously to and through you. And I just kind of was able to know things, right? I didn't speculate that it wouldn't have worked out. I knew, right? I knew. So that was the choice. Either it's all about me and what, I go and become the lead of the elite warrior and have this incredibly cool experience as a DevGuru operator, SEAL Team 6, and have no wife, at least this wife goes away and maybe there'll be someone else down the road, who knows? Or I commit to the marriage and make that work and say, okay, enough is enough, 10 years, that's good. I can finish out in the reserves. And so I chose wisely and chose the wife and I left active duty and became a reservist, which meant that I had the best of both worlds. Not quite the best because, as a reservist, you don't quite get the respect and the opportunity, but, you still get to do cool things. In fact, my only wartime experience was as a reserve officer, lieutenant commander in Iraq. But unless you're mobilized for a year, which I was several times, the rest of the time you work for maybe 45 to 60 days a year. And the rest, you can start a life. And that's when I started my entrepreneurial career, which led me to develop, SEAL Fit and undermined and write my books and stuff. And so had I stayed on active duty, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I would never have been an author, unlikely anyways. I wouldn't have created the programs, SEAL Fit and undermined, which have helped so many people. So it was the right call.
You seem incredibly generous with your knowledge, your experience, and your desire to get your message out. And doing podcasts like this, writing books like Unbeatable Mind, and then setting up the SEAL Fit program. Can you talk to me what your motivation is behind this?
Again, these things are not coming from Mark as you would know Mark, right? Ego has kind of been set aside, laid my sword down. I can't not write and I can't not teach, right? It's just kind of my calling. And if I get to a point where a book isn't wanting to be written, then I'll lay down that sword, right? I'll be like, okay, that's done. My mission's done there. I don't know when that'll happen or if it'll ever happen. Information is never owned by anyone. In fact, nothing is ever able to be truly owned by anyone. Everything, eventually gets transferred or it breaks down or it goes away. So knowledge is meant to be shared, just like wealth is meant to be shared and love is meant to be shared. And the more you share, the more you get, more you have, right? In the linear world, you think that if you give something away, you lose it. In the non-linear world, if you give something away, you gain it. So the more information I can share, the more training, the more insights, then the more insights I gain, right? The more clarity I gain. This is why every time I write, I think, well, this isn't, I can't articulate what I want to say very well, but it's enough. It's good enough for now. So put it out there. And, several years later, there'll be a better way and a more clear way to articulate a concept, or maybe the concept will be completely new, but related to the old concept. And because that information is now flowing through a vessel, me, that has more training, more clarity, more opening, more more insight, so to speak. I think that's the way a calling should unfold, right? If you're in alignment, if you're acting in alignment with your calling or your dharma, then everything is quite effortless and spontaneous, right? This Japanese term shibumi comes to mind, effortless perfection. Doesn't feel like work. Yes, you can have some resistance, but that's the ego. The ego is resistance to life force, to life flow. And so the practice actually, the work of the mental development is actually a process of clarifying the ego, subduing it, and putting it in its right place, which is as a mechanism to get by in the world, but to identify as that, right? This is what the Buddha said is the cause of suffering. So practice also leads to a separation of your identity from the ego sense of self into a broader sense of witnessing awareness, which is more of a universal subjectivity. That pure awareness that is aware that you are alive, that is aware that you are aware, and that is aware of your thoughts. And from that perspective, when you develop your mind to operate with that level of witnessing awareness, then things just kind of flow through you, not unlike Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, right? Just here's a deaf man composing one of the most extraordinary, musical pieces known to mankind. And much of that really was flowing through him. It wasn't coming from his ego, trying to construct the perfect orchestra, perfect symphony.
It's extraordinary. People have preconceived notions of what they think a Navy SEAL or somebody with your military experience is like, and certainly you've definitely
broken a few molds.
Yeah, I think you have broken a few molds for sure. Your philosophy and I think your ability, as I said, to introspect is extraordinary. And some of your observations that you've made about yourself and about life in general, life and love, etc. As you mentioned, your wife are I think, a testament to your self-awareness and the teachings I think that you learned through that chap Nakamura in New York all those years ago.
Mm-hmm. He's an extraordinary guy. After every one of his Zen sits on Thursdays, he would have a little Dharma talk, which, he would have a little chalkboard and a little piece of chalk, and he would write little kanji characters up there, and then he would write in English what it meant. And one of them was one day, one lifetime. And we give a little talk about what that meant. And that one was so profound and powerful for me because, he approached it a couple ways. One, he said, as a warrior, every day could be your last day. So you have to approach it with total awareness, be clear about your intentions and your actions. You don't want to go out with any regrets, any unfinished business, anything's unsaid. And so that idea that every day, if you're going to go to bed and that tomorrow might be your last day, what are you going to do about that, right? How's that going to affect your nighttime routine? And, I'm going to make sure you clean up things. And then when you wake up in the morning, knowing that this could be your last day, how's it going to affect you? So you're going to want to get up and really prepare yourself for the day, right? You're going to win in your mind before you step foot of that battlefield to give yourself a fighting chance, to make sure that you come out on top, right? You're not going to just mess around or take things lightly or cavalierly. The other thing about that saying, one day, one lifetime, was that every day is a lifetime of learning, right? You could think, you could fact check, every single day is the day that you learned something about yourself. Now we just link these and we say, oh yeah, over time I learned this, but that learning happened on a day, right? And so each day is an opportunity for you to learn something extraordinary about the world or about yourself, about others, or all the above. In order to learn at that level, you have to pay attention. Even the Buddha said you can find enlightenment in a single breath if you pay close enough attention. So attention is a trained skill, right? It's basically how you use your mind. Where do you place the energy of your mind? And most people allow their energy to be sucked and taken or, and used manipulated by other people and by, media and by commercialism. I have this saying with my team that if you're not training your mind, then someone else is training it for you, and the results will speak for itself. So with that attention, you're able to take your mind back, right? Reclaim your birthright, and to be able to hold the attention on something that's positive and purposeful and useful. And you pay really close attention to that. And in doing so, you find the meaning to life. Whether it's, gardening or just noticing a beautiful flower or a tree or hanging out with your kids or your pets or working on a deep work project like Cal Newport would be talking about, right? And writing or composing music or playing music or giving a presentation. Like, there's not a single thing that doesn't have the opportunity for deep learning, growth, and awareness. We just have more resistance to some things than to others, right? So mental development is a process of refining the ego to get it out of the way, releasing the resistance to life, and paying radically close attention to the things that are really important, which are not the things that we're necessarily trained by society to think are important.
I love your message. I wish I had you on speed dial. I really do. Your book is called Unbeatable Mind. Where can people find out more about you if they want to seek you out online?
Thanks so much. My website's markdivine.com. The training we've talked about here mostly is Unbeatable Mind, unbeatablemind.com, or if you're into the hardcore physical SEALFIT, SEALFIT.com. And I have my next book coming out July of this year. It's called Uncommon, and you can check out a chapter of it and get some pre-order stuff at readuncommon.com. So I'm excited about that. I've got a copy here, Simple Principles for an Extraordinary Life. So I really kind of pick up where I left off with Unbeatable Mind and go deep into how do we really practically develop some of these skills I was talking about here.
Amazing stuff. We'll pop links to all of those websites in the show notes for this episode. Commander Mark Divine, thank you so much for joining me today. I could listen to you for another hour, but I've kept you far too long at this stage. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been an honor. Booyah.
Well, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Happy Habit podcast. If you liked it or any of the previous 400 plus, show your support. It's free. You can like, subscribe, share with other people who you think might enjoy these episodes too. Leave us a thumbs up, a positive rating on iTunes or on Spotify, and on YouTube. You can become a subscriber there too. You can leave a comment and click that bell notification for any future videos. Until next time, stay happy.